I'm back on my bullshit. This is balding on a budget. So since the cookies episode went so well, obviously I should take a break from baking and move into something a little more savory. So for today, we are celebrating Claire Saffitz's new book and baking. I'll be cooking the cover and baking this olive oil and blood orange upside down cake. If you haven't picked up Dessert Person by Claire Saffitz, I highly endorse it. Great book, came out maybe a month ago. Really affordable and really instructional. Great pickup. Maybe one of these days I'll bake something from a non-Bon Appetit employee or Bon Appetit affiliate, but today ain't that day. The consistent ingredients between the two ways I'm making this are going to be cake flour, white sugar, kosher salt, baking powder, things like that. But there are 4 points in which I'm going to be choosing 2 different price points of ingredients. So we'll be working with 2 different levels of olive oil, Grand Marnier versus just orange juice, probably mispronounced that, blood orange versus orange, and supermarket eggs versus fancy organic eggs. And actually this is out of a cookbook, so it might be copyrighted, which means I might not be able to go through the whole recipe. Claire, if this is copyright infringement, please don't sue me. I'm just a guy making a YouTube channel out of his parents' kitchen. I can't handle the legal fees. This recipe calls for some specialized equipment, notably springform pans. It also calls for these pans to be lined with parchment paper. Parchment paper doesn't come in circles though, so we need to cut circles out of normal parchment paper. Start with a piece of parchment paper in a square larger than the pan that you'll be using. Fold it in half again, then fold it corner to corner. Continue repeating this process until you've got about a 1-inch separation in the median. Put the point in the center of your pan and trim along the edge. Make any adjustments you need and unfold. Press down into the pan and there you have it.
So what you are going to do here is you put in some olive oil and then you just kind of spread it around town, and once you cut your parchment you put that in the pan and then drizzle a little more of the liquid gold on top.
Since the citrus rinds are going in the cake, you want to make sure that they are scrubbed clean as well as they can be, and that you've removed the stems from both sides. Position the fruits so that the poles are at either end and slice off each of them, reserving them for later. There's going to be about 20 to 30 slices of each citrus, so you want to make sure that they're cut razor thin, nothing larger than 1/8 of an inch. I had a friend in college named Mikey who once told me a joke where he said, "Do you know why they're called blood oranges? 'Cause they're fucking delicious." Don't really know why that joke stuck with me. He's a dentist now, and I'm making cooking videos for YouTube in my parents' kitchen. When you get to the end, remember to save it because you'll be squeezing it for juice later. If you're inadvisably making this recipe twice, when you're done with the blood oranges, move on to the regular oranges, which I'm realizing now look a little closer to yellows. Now when you're slicing the citrus, you want to make sure that you're being mindful of seeds because you really don't want those to end up in the cake. And really you can use any kind of citrus you want other than blood orange as long as it has a really thin peel. I'm using just normal oranges for this one because I live in Florida and it is our greatest export other than bath salts and Medicare fraud. After you've sliced the citrus, grab those end pieces that you reserved and squeeze as much juice out of them as you can. Make a slurry by combining 2 tablespoons of the reserved juice with 1/3 cup of white sugar. Pour the slurry into your parchment and oil prepared pan and tilt it in all directions to coat the bottom. With the slurry in place, begin shingling the slices of your citrus. It should take anywhere between 25 and 30 slices per pan. You want to make sure they're overlapping a little bit, but not too much. In a medium bowl, mix together 1 1/3 cups of cake flour and 1/2 cup of semolina flour. Also add 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt and 2 teaspoons of baking powder. In a smaller bowl, add 1 tablespoon of orange zest with 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract and 3 tablespoons of Grand Marnier, which again, I can't seem to pronounce. And since all the YouTube money comes from the tweens, if you can't buy Grand Marnier, either because you're too young or your parents took your fake ID, orange juice will work. Finally, in a large bowl, combine 1 cup of sugar with 3 large eggs. I'm going to ditch the tripod for a moment and tell you about a problem. I need to whip these eggs into a ribbon stage, which another reason you should buy this book is It has great references for everything you could do earlier on. But this is achieved best with a stand mixer that has the whisk attachment. And I don't have the whisk attachment. I have the paddle attachment. So we're going back to old reliable. It'll take a little bit longer, but it'll get the job done. Just know that if you're using a hand mixer to make ribbony eggs, you don't need to worry about Biden's tax plan. You'll know that the egg and sugar mixture is in the ribbon stage when you pull the mixer out and the batter falls off holding its shape for just a second before melting back into the rest. Once you've reached the ribbon stage, begin streaming in 1 1/4 cup of olive oil. You want to do this really slowly so that it'll emulsify in. And don't be surprised if you actually have a loss in volume, as you'll be knocking out a lot of the air that you mixed in during the ribbon stage. After you've added all the oil, reduce your mixing speed to low and add 1/3 of your flour mixture, followed up with 1/2 of your Grand Marnier mixture, then flour, then Grand Marnier, and then the last bit of flour. Once you've added the final 1/3 of the flour mixture, turn off your mixer and grab a flexible spatula. Use this to fold the batter a few times, making sure to scrape down the sides and the bottom of the bowl. And with that, your batter is done. Pour it over your sliced citrus and allow it to mesmerize you, even as you sit alone in your room recording voiceover on iMovie. Oh, and preheat your oven to 400 degrees. While not stated to do explicitly in the recipe, I put a piece of parchment paper down in my oven before I put the cakes in there, which proved to be very smart. Yes, this is foreshadowing. Immediately before putting the cakes in, drop your oven temperature to 350. They should bake for about 35 to 40 minutes, or when a toothpick comes out clean and the tops are golden brown. And if you're asking yourself why I lined the oven rack with parchment paper, it's just a fun, cute thing I do. It's not to take care of a leak, because I didn't have a leak. If I had a leak, I would have told you about a leak. I definitely didn't have a leak. Once the cakes have cooled for 15 minutes and you've assured the fire department that there's nothing to worry about, run a knife around the edge and take off the springform pan. Put on some oven mitts if one of them is still hot because you burnt a bunch of sugar to the bottom, which obviously didn't happen to me, but hey, it could happen to you. If that's the case, just free it from its glucose prison and gander at your very okay looking cake. You'll need to invert the cake onto a plate in order to get the top off. Feel free to enlist some friendly family help in this.
I still need you to hold it.
Okay.
I can't hold the whole. You need to help me flip it.
Okay, so tell me
Just
what to do.
flip it.
I can't hold it and flip it. I'm holding it. We're gonna go like this?
Yes.
Oh, let's say so.
That's what flipping means. There you go.
Mind focus?
Yeah, but your head's a little cut off. Do you care?
Not really.
Okay.
I look less bald that way. So we have both versions. Blood orange with Grand Marnier, fancy eggs and olive oil. And we've got the normal version, or the cheaper version, with oranges and orange juice and an inadequate cook time. Actual recipe one is really tasty. It's a little bit bitter, which I think is kind of what you expect with blood oranges. So having something like vanilla ice cream or whipped cream would be really good with it. But it tastes really good. The orange one.
You didn't get any orange on that bite.
We'll get in there. It's not like raw batter. Like it's cooked enough to be safely eaten, but not enough to have the texture that you want. But the flavor's kind of boring. So on the bottom, like the crumb is good. Yeah, you like that? The rind of the oranges are not all the way cooked. I think it's hard for me to say which one is truly better because I didn't cook the orange one all the way through. Flavor-wise, I think the original is the way to go. Don't really taste a ton of difference in just the cake by itself. And this is an upside down cake, so when you're baking it, there's not a whole lot of danger of the flavors of the citrus seeping through because the citruses are on the bottom. So tasting just the cake part by itself, they taste about the same. So I don't think you need to get a fancy olive oil. You don't need to get fancy eggs. I would go for blood oranges if you can get them. Overall, when cooked correctly into the recipe, I really like it. I think it's tasty. I think you should buy this book. delicious. So I had a little bit of a cascading problem with these cakes. The one with the blood oranges obviously had a little bit of a leak in the springform pan. When I pulled it out and it left some of the juice on the parchment paper I had put down, after a few minutes I started to smoke and burn. So I kind of panicked. I threw one toothpick into the orange one, it came out clean. I just hit the wrong spot. If there had been no leak in the springform pan, the orange one would have gotten enough time to cook, but the flavor just wasn't really there. I think the oranges that I had were a little too bargain bin and don't carry the rest of the cake the way that the blood oranges do. I would certainly use just a regular olive oil. The eggs don't make a difference. I think there is a little bit more of a pronounced orange flavor. I think is the Grand Marnier over the orange juice. And no, I'll never pronounce Grand Marnier correctly. If there's anything I would splurge on, I would say get the blood oranges or some other form of citrus, like a persimmon or something like that. And if you can get Grand Marnier, it might be worth it, but don't break the bank over it. Anyways, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you want. I would love for you to. Follow me on Instagram. If you have any ideas or requests for what you'd like to see me cook, let me know. Put it down in the comments. And have a good Thanksgiving, if this comes out before Thanksgiving. But you know, if I learned anything from this, Mikey was right. Blood oranges are fucking delicious.